Hello and welcome to this edition of Bayou Time. Again, your host, Keith Whiteside, licensed clinical social worker with Charitable Home Care. So very glad you're joining us. However you may be joining us, we appreciate it. And I can tell you, we're always glad when our next guest is joining us. Archie Chaisson, back in the house. Thanks for being here, Archie.
Good to see you again, Keith.
All right, we appreciate it. Well, Archie, one of those things, Lafourche Parish president, always glad to get just a general update here in the heat of summer. Tell us what's happening in Lafourche.
Yeah, we're trying to stay cool like everybody else. I think
right.
these temperatures are crazy as we try to figure out, how to take care of our employees who are out doing the normal work of parish government and everything in between. But, I think overall we're doing really well. We still kind of concentrate on metrics, post Ida, right? Unfortunately, sure. Even though it's scary to think we're almost at the year mark already. We're at 60 days out or so, but things are still trucking along very, very smoothly. We're still doing some debris operations.
Right.
Have 11 trucks running right now, most of which are in South Lafourche because they were still the kind of hardest impacted area. Yeah, but we do still have some stuff, Highway 90 going north into Thibodeau that we're still, random stuff that we're still picking up. Right. But we're hopeful that that'll all go away by the end of the month, or contractors telling us that they should be done. So I think what you're going to see us kind of let them disappear again like we did over Easter. Right. If we see some stuff starting to build back up that our typical garbage collector can't deal with or can't keep up with, we'll bring a couple of trucks back in and clean sweep it again. And we'll be on that mantra for a few months, I'm sure. Because, look, people are still dealing with insurance companies and still gutting their homes and doing stuff. Right. Still just beginning to tear certain things down. So we remind people that if you have a contractor doing your work, that the contractor is responsible for the debris removal. But overall, we're doing really well. It was good to see, graduations happen at our high schools over the last couple of weeks. It's good to see those kids who haven't really never had a tame school year in the last couple of years finally get to do some normal stuff and see those graduations go off of the cuff. Had a great fair and festival season in the spring. Yep. So in the summer, it's families are traveling, doing their own thing. So you're going to see some wind down in parish government as we that's our catch up time, right? As things kind of slow down, we aren't as busy in the summer without any storms. So it allows us to progress projects. We're still, pushing pump station redesigns and pump station improvements from the damage from Hurricane Ida. We have a couple of road projects that both in North Lafourche and South Lafourche that are bidding out right now. So you'll see some asphalt work happening over the course of the back half of the summer to the tune of about $4 million parish wide. We're going to redo some surface streets. We have the Valentine Pontoon Bridge that I think we've talked about before on the show we should have out to permitting and hopefully out to bid by the latter part of this year and into construction, which is huge, right? We had the conversation today. There was a wreck unfortunately on Highway 308 this morning that blocked off that road, and it's an 8-mile stretch in either directions, right? Yeah. So it's critical to have those access points across by Lafourche. So we're working hard on those projects. So take a little baby step to normal every day, right? And we're getting there slowly but surely.
Most important thing you said was that government gets to slow down a little bit in the summer. As long as we don't have a storm.
As long as we don't have a storm.
And listen, we're just wanting to be prayerful and mindful that we don't have a storm, but mindful in our preparation for it. And I know you guys do a great job with handling that and Director of Emergency Preparedness as well.
Yeah, and look, Chris and I have this conversation often. We had it driving over here. We get caught in these cycles of hurricane seasons, and for us, this one's going to be a little different. Mm-hmm. We typically plan evacuations around a certain number of people. Well, you think about all those people who are in these state trailers and in FEMA units that are not just hurricane evacuation now we got to worry about just severe thunderstorms and tropical storms. And where do we send these people? Do we have the generator capacity? Is the Red Cross going to come in and help us man those shelters with 4,000 people in it now instead of just a couple of thousand, right? We've doubled that number in some cases almost. So we're working, I got to give it to our Head Start staff teachers, really, our Head Start staff teachers, because they're typically out during the summer months, really come in and help us with those shelter operations. So they do a great job. And that whole command group we have does a really good job at trying to figure out what this new evacuation plan and new hurricane season is going to look like.
Well, do we have the same buildings that we had before? Are they ready? Are they, because there's a lot of work being done to a lot of buildings and a lot of even, parish buildings.
Yeah, and look, even in a post-COVID, what I now call the post-COVID.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what we want to
be. We're seeing issues. We're having to transition because some of those buildings that we used to use in the past are either damaged or, in some cases, FEMA is occupying. We've leased them to FEMA for space so they can help our people out continually. Right. So we're looking at other places. Well, those other places may not have generator capabilities. So we're having to put transfer switches and things like that in those buildings. So you bid out a transfer switch for a school in this particular case, which should run us about $100,000. Well, it comes in double that.
It's $225 now.
It's $225, and the lead time to get that transfer switch into us, instead of being a couple weeks, is now 66. So it's not even going to be here in time for this hurricane season.
Right.
So now we're scrambling with the school system and, and their maintenance personnel to figure out, all right, how do we basically hotwire this generator if we have to into your school? We know we can. They know what
Right.
they're doing, right? But it's just another dynamic of things we have to deal with that we haven't had to deal with in the past. And when COVID hit, it was how do you evacuate people with COVID still there? Well, that's still somewhat of an issue, and some people still worry about that. We have plans in place for that now, but how do you evacuate this many people when, and I know Earl's on the show quite often, when we all basically go to the same places,
Right.
right? And how do we have enough space, and do we have enough people to take care of what is now 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 people instead of just a few thousand? So it changes the game on us a little bit.
And we're talking about 10,000 in Lafourche, 10,000 in Terrebonne, and where we would normally help each other out, which has been the remarkable thing. EOCs, everything, really being able to help each other out. Now we're a little limited to what we can do.
No doubt, no doubt. And so it flips the script on us in a lot of times, and in a lot of ways this hurricane season. And how do we get people back after, right? You know, are they going to come home to a FEMA camper or a state travel trailer that's now on its side? So now they're back in Lafourche, but technically still don't have a place to live. So where are we going to house them? If we send them out of parish, where do we put them when they come back? So it's just been a whole dynamic that I'm glad we have a really good team in that realm that knows what they're doing from day to day and from year to year. And we've been able to figure it out fairly quickly with, again, helping our neighboring parishes and stuff like that. But it's been a chore for us.
And communicating with the governor about what is a different kind of emergency than we've had in the past based on those number of people that may need it. And, you know, we've been talking for a long time about how we can find a way to do what we need to do now and look forward to the future. Let's talk a little bit about the RISE Act. And it seems like some people are putting their heads together to really think about where we are and what we need to do.
Yeah, so we were up in D.C. a week or two ago. There was
Right.
a group of probably about 40 Louisianians that went up there from not just government folks, but private sectors, engineers, nonprofit advisory groups, that sort of thing. So, you know, in 2006, Senator Mary Landrieu at the time came up with this idea for revenue sharing from the Gulf of Mexico for all the oil and gas drilling we do. In those inland states, the Dakotas, the New Mexicos, those people who drill on federal lands inshore, they get up to 50% of the revenue that they produce in energy instead of it all going to the federal government. They can use it for a whole host of things, boat launches, amusement parks. There's not a whole lot of restrictions on them. So Mary at the time said, well, if they get to do that inland, why don't we get to do that on the Gulf? So in 2006, they passed the Gulf of Mexico Energy Security Act, or what we call GOMESA, back then. It didn't really took 10 years to go into effect for purely political reasons. So in 2017, we really started to get that money in. And in Louisiana and across the Gulf Coast, they kind of limited us to what we can do with it. A lot of it in Louisiana goes to hurricane protection and flood protection. So we've used that on a whole host of things, right? From Morganza to the Gulf to floodgates to home elevations and stuff, the non-structural component of the master plan as well.
Waterways,
all that fun stuff. So Senator Cassidy, now that offshore wind is becoming a real thing, we have fought for years to get from 37.5%. So when they drafted the bill, the highest percentage Mary could get at the time was 37.5% instead of 50.
Okay.
And there's an arbitrary $125 million cap per state that goes along with this. So we fought for years to get the cap off, to raise the percentage, and then open the Gulf up to more lease beds than what was originally in the 2006 legislation. So Senator Cassidy and Senator Whitehouse from Rhode Island worked through this RISE Act legislation that not only deals with those things we wanted in GOMESA revenues, the elimination of the cap, the new percentage, that sort of stuff, but they also are tying offshore wind revenue into it, right? So we're on the cusp of probably the first quarter of 2023 seeing an offshore wind block lease go to sale. So to give you some kind of perspective, there was one about 2 months ago off the coast of New York, generated $4.4 billion, right? If the RISE Act were in place when that would have happened, New York would have got 50% of $4.4 billion.
$2.2 billion.
That's right.
What can any government do with $2.2 billion?
Right? And it would have gone to the coastal counties in New York, and
Sure.
then the state would have gotten the money, and they could, again, put it toward beach restorations and all the fun stuff that they want to do.
Right.
So we got really excited when we saw those numbers, knowing that this RISE Act was coming out. So what we've done over the course of the last couple of weeks in D.C. has been meeting with other legislators, meeting with, in our particular case, our group met with 2 Democrats from Oregon, a Republican from Texas, and a Democrat from New York, and said, look, we need you to pass this legislation for us locally in Louisiana and the Gulf states because of the GOMESA revenue, but the West Coast around Oregon and California has some current lease sale blocks that are going to be coming out next year. You guys are seeing a ton of it off the East Coast. So this not only helps us, it really helps you, right? Because the generation of the money on the GOMESA side it's going to increase. They'll probably double it in some cases. But the real money for those guys is in the wind.
In the
industry,
wind, right.
And if we're going to talk about alternative sources of energy, which is great, I have no problem doing that. We need to make sure that we're going to be on the cusp of how do we be financially responsible with those dollars when they come in. So it could be a game changer for us in a couple of ways. From the revenue standpoint, it's going to be huge because we're going to be able to really fund levees and coastal restoration projects and stuff like that, especially in a post-Ida world, making levees higher, rebuilding the marsh that we lost, things like that. But from a wind energy side, Port Fourchon is specifically positioned to be the gateway, as what I've begun to copyright, the gateway to Gulf wind. Because all of the lift boats that worked off the East Coast that have built these things, guess where they came from?
Came from right here.
Cut off in Houma,
That's
right?
right.
All of the people who went to work up there, guess where they came from? Mainly Lafourche and Terrebonne. So we have the expertise to be able to do it. So it's a really exciting potential for us. Now, this is probably 5-6 years out by the time we get there. There's still a lot of engineering work that needs to be figured out. How do we deal with hurricanes? They've kind of done that somewhat on the East Coast. They've begun to do offshore wind in Japan, off the coast of Japan. So they've done some tsunami engineering, which is pretty much the same thing.
Right.
So it's an exciting prospect for us. We made a couple of trips to some offshore wind initiatives up in the Northeast to kind of see how they're doing it, how it affects the local governments, things that we can do from a tax incentive perspective to lure companies to come to Lafourche and Louisiana to be able to do this. So it's a really exciting potential, but we really got some good reception from those visits on the RISE Act because they see the benefit, although they may not be pro oil and gas like we are here.
Right.
They see the benefit of both, right?
Yeah. And there can be that marriage, if you will, or partnership. It's like Lafourche and Terrebonne do all the time in partnering to make things better. Morganza is a good example of that. But this is another one of those ways to say, listen, we're already doing a lot of the building and construction and engineering for these things already. Let's us be a part of that on the front end, the value of having it done, and then on the back end, getting the money that should stay at home.
Yeah.
No doubt, to be able to do that.
And we've stressed a lot that, Louisiana and especially Lafourche and Terrebonne and our coastal parishes are the prime example of how energy and the environment can work together, right? Whether it's traditional oil and gas or whether it's alternative sources like solar or wind. Look at it. Look at all the mega projects we've done through GOMESA funding and other, the BP fines and stuff like that to rebuild our environment. We constantly invest in that to the credit of Chip Klein with CPRA and Governor Edwards.
Right.
They plug a bunch of money into coastal projects every year because they believe in it. They believe in the work that Wendell and Reggie and Dwayne and all of our levee partners are doing, and we continue to push that money in. So having this other source of revenue that would come in would be huge for our local area to continue to build those levees higher and things like that, to continue to protect our people as we deal with rising homeowner insurance costs and flood insurance costs and things like that.
So as those things rise, we need to find a way to rise up and make sure that this RISE Act is passed.
I might have to remember that one. That was a good one.
Yeah, well, Rise Up was a men's conference, and so I don't want to steal that away from Father Mark and Christ the Redeemer. But Rise Up that's one of the things we got to do and make the RISE Act work. You can use that at your leisure.
I appreciate that, Keith.
Always glad to have you on. Thank you, my friend. I
Good to see you.
appreciate it. All right, guys, that's going to do it for this particular segment. Don't go anywhere. A lot more Bayou time when we continue.